Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. You're watching In Deep on the Delta, and today we're going to talk about the change of light bite. I generally catch good numbers of fish, and I also catch some of the biggest fish of the year during this bite window. It's my favorite time to fish, and we're talking about the time of day between about 4:30 to 5 a.m. to about 7 a.m. and then again in the evening from about 7:30 p.m. to about 10 p.m. We're going to go over everything you need to know. We're going to talk about baits. We're going to talk about getting started out here, and I want to really talk about specific bite patterns that happen in the morning and the evening, and that really helps you when it comes into learning what baits to throw and when to change baits. So we're going to start off with a few of the basics, and let's just remember, when we're fishing this bite window, we're going to be fishing in total darkness, at low light, and then light. When you plan a trip, make sure you plan to fish in an area that you are familiar with. You don't want to fish unfamiliar water. You don't want to go out searching for fish. So plan your trip, your little 3-hour excursion here, on in an area that you know has fish and that you are familiar with. Even better if that area that you're in has specific areas within that area that you can pop around maybe 3 or 4 times during that small bite window. And the bite window is going just like during the daytime. Nothing's guaranteed, and the length of the bite window is never guaranteed. It may be 15 minutes, it could be a couple hours, depending on tides, moon phases, weather conditions, wind. Everything has a play in it, and when everything lines up, that change of light, if you've got the right tide, the right moon phase, it can be absolutely incredible. But just keep in mind that it is fishing out here. Just because you're out here early or late doesn't mean you're going to catch fish. So anyhow, we're going to plan our trip in familiar water. Hopefully that water is near your favorite launch ramp so that you don't have to run after dark or before light too far. And that area is going to have specific spots within it, so you can jump around and fish each one of those spots maybe 3 or 4 times during the bite window at different levels of light. You also want to fish familiar baits. You don't want to come out and experiment with baits. So when I say fish familiar baits, make sure you're throwing confidence baits, and make sure that you are that you have baits that you know by feel. You know the speed that they have to be retrieved, the cadence that they have to be retrieved. You can feel when they're popping right, when they're, if it's a twitch bait or a wake bait, you know when just the right cadence you want, when to twitch it, when to stop it. You know everything about that bait. So if maybe you happen to get that bait fouled up with some vegetation, you know when it's not working right, you pull it in, clean the vegetation, and get out there. You don't waste a lot of time. They are short bite windows. You don't want to waste a lot of time. You don't want to be experimenting with new areas or new water, or new areas or new baits. So with that, I want to explain the bite pattern, and that we're going to start with that because that bite pattern that I see day in, day out really helps me when it comes to figuring out what baits I'm going to use, how fast I'm going to use them, and when to change baits. So this is the general pattern, and we'll go over the evening pattern first and then the morning pattern because it changes. It's the same in a lot of ways, but the timing of it changes. So in the evening, let's just say we start at 7 p.m. You're in a daylight bite situation. It's, you know, whatever it is during the day that you're out there. As the bite window starts, as the light levels start to change, the first thing that happens is the smaller fish, the fish from the bucks from about 12 inches to 2 pounds, they get active and they are predominantly in the mix. That's starting that evening bite. So you've got, let's just say it goes from nothing to start picking up fish, the smaller fish. Then when it gets into the prime period, you'll start picking up bigger fish. Now, when the bigger fish get active, the smaller fish tend to move out of their way and let the big fish bite. That can happen for, again, 15 minutes. If you're lucky, a half an hour, 45 minutes. And then as those big fish start to kind of fade away, the small fish come back and get very active. And if you can look at that like a scale that goes like this, small fish start here, big fish, small fish. And as those small fish enter the mix, they'll get real aggressive, and you'll be catching fish almost every second, third, fourth, fifth cast. And right about evening, right about as the sun goes down and it gets dark and you think they're really going to start, they stop. Bam. That's it. Don't fool yourself and say, it's time for me to go in. When that bite stops in the evening, when it turns dark, that's when you go with bigger baits, and that's when you have an opportunity to catch the biggest fish of the night or the day or the year a lot of times. That half an hour to 45 minutes after the small fish stop biting, that's when the super tanks come in, and that's when I catch most of my fish over 7 pounds. Just remember that kind of philosophy. In the morning, super tanks, not a lot of fish, but big fish, big fish, small fish, and then daylight. In the evening, it's daylight, small fish starting, bigger fish, small fish, the bite dies, then you have about a half an hour period to catch the big tanks. So what are we using, and why did I tell you this information about this pattern of bite window? As I choose my baits, and I only use about a half a dozen baits primarily. The 3 rods that I have to have are a small popper, this is a bubble walker, a big popper, that's another bubble walker, and some type of wake bait, a Mikey. These are 3 rods that I have set up every day of the summer, and these baits do not come off of these rods. Big fish. I will also make sure I have bluegill patterns. Big bluegill patterns, small bluegill patterns, anything that is a wake bait type bluegill, like a searching, like this, what is this, Bait Sanity Searcher, or this is a mega bass, I forget the name of it. It goes down to about 3 or 4 feet, but I will definitely have those baits on hand. Buzz baits. Definitely want buzz baits, especially if the wind is up. I prefer a single bladed buzz bait if I'm looking for lots of fish. I'll go with a double bladed buzz bait if I'm looking for big fish. Now this is a mini double bladed buzz bait, but you'll catch more fish on the single blade. When you get the big double blades, if you get a little wind coinciding with that change of light, that's when I'll put on the big double bladed buzz bait. I won't get as many bites, but I'll get bigger fish on that. If you are a fan of a chatterbait, you always want to be using a chatterbait at low light periods, even after dark. Chatterbaits work wonderfully. If you like spinner baits, that's a good option out here. You can also use a number of different either underspin type things like this guy, or oddball little things that have some type of vibration on it the fish can hone in on. Whatever you are confident in with those moving baits, try them. Just make sure you know how they feel when you're reeling them in, know the thump of the blade, know when they're hung up, and know all their little inconsistencies. And the last subsurface bait I'll talk about, and the last bait that I'll fish, is a big 10-inch power worm, something with the tail on it. I'll even put a rattle in it. I make sure that I put a lot of scent on these, and if I'm fishing after dark, I'll use these big worms. And those are the baits that you really need to focus in on. And again, another bait, before I go any further, big rats. I love big rats, and these are one of the baits that I will throw very early in the morning. When I talk about those, if I get out super early, this is the first bait I'll have on, or a big wake bait, something big that's going to attract the biggest fish in the river. That's that tank period. First thing in the morning when it's dark, the fish really haven't woken up yet, that's when you catch the big fish. Or after the bite dies in the evening and you're catching a bunch of small fish and then all of a sudden it stops, I go from this bait to these baits. Maybe I go out at 7 in the evening. I'll start off with a chatterbait and a worm. Maybe I'm starting to catch a few fish on this, then all of a sudden the light starts to deteriorate. It's starting that change of light. I'll go to a topwater, a small topwater. I get a fish or two on this, and then I get a big blow up. I immediately move into either a bigger walking bait like a spook, or this big bubble walker, or a wake bait. And I will throw these baits through that period where the big fish are biting. Now, if I start getting fish after 45 minutes or so, maybe a half an hour, maybe 15 minutes, I catch 4 or 5 nice fish on big baits, and I could see these smaller fish coming up and start to get more and more active, and the bigger fish aren't quite as active. Then I go back to a smaller popper, or maybe a chatterbait, or I might even throw, you know, a worm or a smaller, something smaller, to have some fun with the fish in the 1 to 3 pound class. Now, as soon as those small fish stop, and it like I say, in the evening, it's abruptly, it's abrupt, and you make 10 casts, you don't get anything on, you know, your smaller poppers and stuff, I go right to this big bait here, or back to a big wake bait. And one of the things that I look for on a wake bait, if you don't have one of these, is this big bill, this guy here. You notice on both of these, look at the bill on both of these things. They're huge bills, and the reason that they're built like that is so that they push a lot of water, but they roll. They have this side-to-side roll and motion, and that just seems to be a big fish catcher, not only on the Delta, but anywhere you fish. So I will always start my day with the big baits, and I will end my day with the big baits. Another thing that I want to point out is one of the reasons why there are not only lots of fish during the change of light bite, but big fish, is because I firmly believe that there are fish that primarily feed in the daytime, and there are fish that primarily feed in the evening time. The fish that feed in the evening time are generally the bigger fish that have been around longer. They know how to use their senses. They know that it's easier prey that they can get to at night. They're not bothered by boats. They're not bothered by other predators, by birds, and those bigger fish tend to come out in the evening. But by fishing the change of light bite, you get the best of both worlds. You get fish that primarily feed in the day and fish that primarily feed at night, all feeding at the same time. You also have those big fish that primarily feed after dark coming in and feeding. So it's just a wonderful time to fish. There's no reason not to be out here. You're going to catch fish, you're going to make yourself a better angler, and you're going to have a lot of fun, and you probably have the river pretty much to yourself. It seems like everybody leaves right when the fish are biting. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys on the river.